The wind swept across the Arizona mountains as the last rays of the setting sun disappeared behind the red cliffs. Dust drifted through the quiet Apache camp, carrying with it the scent of cedar smoke and fresh earth. The celebration had ended hours earlier. Laughter had faded. The drums had fallen silent, and only the crackling fire remained. Inside a small wooden cabin at the edge of the camp, 18-year-old Clara Bennett sat alone. Her hands trembled as she twisted the edge of her simple white dress. She had crossed the frontier only months before with her parents, hoping to begin a new life in the West. Instead, fever had stolen both of them within weeks. Alone and without money, Clara had become dependent on strangers. When a violent outlaw gang threatened the nearby settlement, an agreement between the settlers and a peaceful Apache band brought temporary safety. Part of that agreement was a marriage that neither side truly understood. Now Clara was the bride. Stories about her new husband filled her thoughts. Settlers called him the giant Apache, a warrior who could lift a grown man with one hand and disappear into the mountains without leaving footprints. Mothers frightened children by whispering his name. Every rumor made him seem less like a man and more like a legend. The cabin door creaked open. Clara froze. A tall figure stepped inside, nearly filling the doorway. Broad shoulders blocked the fading light before he quietly closed the door behind him. He carried no weapon in his hands. Instead, he placed a bundle of firewood beside the stone fireplace and lit another lantern, brightening the room with a warm golden glow. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The Apache warrior glanced toward Clara but kept a respectful distance. "I am Kai," he said softly, his English careful but clear. Clara lowered her eyes, unable to answer. Kai noticed the fear in her expression. He had seen it before in settlers who had never spoken to an Apache but already believed every terrible story they had heard. He slowly removed the heavy hunting knife from his belt and placed it on the table several feet away. Then he stepped back. "I don't want you to fear me," he said quietly. Clara looked up, surprised. His voice carried no anger. There was only calm. "I know this marriage was not your choice." She finally found the courage to speak. I don't know you." "No," Kai replied with a faint nod. "And I do not know you either." Silence returned. Outside, coyotes called across the valley while the wind rattled the cabin walls. Kai walked toward the fireplace instead of toward Clara. He placed another log on the flames and sat on a wooden chair across the room, leaving plenty of space between them. "If you wish," he said, "you may sleep inside. I will remain here by the fire." Clara blinked in disbelief. You're staying out here? Until you believe this is also your home." His answer caught her completely off guard. Everything she had expected vanished in that single moment. The monster from the stories did not stand before her. Instead, she saw a quiet man whose dark eyes carried the weight of old sorrow. Clara slowly relaxed her grip on her dress. "What happened to your family?" she asked before realizing the question had escaped her lips. Kai stared into the fire for several seconds. "They are gone." Only 3 words. But they sounded heavier than any long explanation. Clara sensed that behind those words lay years of grief she could not yet understand. For the first time since arriving in the Apache camp, she wondered whether the lonely warrior had suffered losses much like her own. Neither of them spoke again that night. The fire crackled between them while the cold mountain wind howled outside the cabin. 2 strangers. 2 wounded hearts. And somewhere beyond the darkness, a future neither of them could yet imagine quietly waited to begin. Morning sunlight poured through the cabin window, casting golden streaks across the rough wooden floor. Clara stirred beneath the wool blanket, confused for a moment about where she was. Then the memories of the previous evening returned: the quiet Apache camp, the strange marriage, and the silent warrior named Kai. She sat up quickly. The chair by the fireplace was empty. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, but someone had carefully placed fresh water beside the bed along with a small basket of warm cornbread, dried berries, and honey. There was no note, only the simple gesture. Clara hesitated before taking a bite. She had expected hostility, not kindness. Stepping outside, she found the morning alive with activity. Women prepared meals over open fires while children chased one another through the camp, laughing as if they had never known fear. A few men repaired saddles and sharpened tools. The atmosphere was peaceful, nothing like the savage camps she had imagined from stories told back east. Her eyes searched until she spotted Kai. He stood beside a wounded horse near a stream, gently wrapping its injured leg with strips of clean cloth. The powerful warrior moved with surprising patience, speaking softly to calm the frightened animal. An elderly Apache woman noticed Clara watching. "You are his wife," she said in careful English. Clara nodded uncertainly. The woman smiled warmly. "Kai has always cared more for healing than fighting." Clara frowned. "But everyone says he's a great warrior." "He is," the woman replied. "That is why he dislikes war." Those words stayed with Clara. Later that morning, Kai approached carrying 2 wooden buckets. "There is a spring beyond the trees," he said. "Would you like to come? You should know where fresh water is." Clara hesitated before following him. The trail wound through towering pines and bright wildflowers. Birds sang overhead while deer moved quietly between the trees. Kai walked several steps ahead, never once trying to hurry her or invade her space. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "Why do you live alone?" Kai paused. "My family once lived here." He continued walking. "My father died defending our village. My mother became ill the following winter. My younger sister's voice caught for a brief moment. She did not survive the raids." "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. Kai nodded but said nothing more. When they reached the spring, he knelt to fill the buckets. As Clara watched him, she noticed a long scar stretching across his shoulder where his shirt had shifted. It looked old but deep. "You were injured?" Kai smiled faintly. "Many winters ago. In battle." He looked toward the mountains before answering. "Protecting children?" The simplicity of his reply surprised her more than any dramatic story could have. On their walk back, shouting echoed from farther down the valley. A frightened little Apache boy had wandered too close to the steep river bank. His foot slipped on loose rocks, and he cried out as he struggled to keep his balance. Without hesitation, Kai dropped both buckets. He sprinted toward the cliff. Clara gasped. The warrior reached the boy just as the ground beneath him crumbled. Wrapping one powerful arm around the child, Kai threw himself backward onto solid ground. Dust filled the air as stones tumbled into the rushing river below. The child burst into tears. Kai simply hugged him until he calmed down. "It's all right," he whispered. "I'm here." The boy's mother ran over, thanking Kai through tears. He merely smiled and handed the frightened child back to her before retrieving the spilled buckets as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Clara stood frozen. No one had applauded him. No one seemed surprised. To the people in the camp, this was simply who Kai was. A protector. Not a monster. As they continued walking home, Clara found herself studying him differently. The fear she had carried since meeting him had not disappeared completely, but another feeling had quietly taken its place. Curiosity. Perhaps the story she had believed all her life had never been about the real Kai at all. And perhaps the greatest mystery was not why she had been brought here, but why a man with such a gentle heart had chosen to live alone. Several weeks passed, and the unfamiliar rhythms of Apache life slowly became part of Clara's daily routine. Each morning began with the soft glow of sunrise spilling across the valley. The camp awakened not with shouting or hurried footsteps, but with quiet purpose. Smoke rose from cooking fires, horses grazed peacefully along the hillsides, and children laughed as they chased one another through the tall grass. For the first time since losing her parents, Clara found herself waking without the heavy weight of fear pressing against her chest. Kai never expected her to become someone she wasn't. He simply invited her to learn. One morning he handed her a small woven basket. "Come," he said with a faint smile. "Today, I show you where the sweetest berries grow." The path climbed into the foothills, where pine trees swayed gently in the cool breeze. Along the way, Kai pointed out edible plants, healing herbs, and animal tracks hidden in the soft earth. "This leaf helps fever," he explained. "And this flower. My mother used it for coughs." Clara listened carefully, surprised by how much knowledge he carried. Every tree, every stream, and every mountain seemed to hold a memory for him. "You remember everything," she said. Kai smiled. "The land remembers us first." The words stayed with her long after they returned home. Life together remained quiet, but the silence no longer felt uncomfortable. During meals they shared simple conversations. Clara spoke about the green fields of Missouri where she had grown up, the apple pies her mother baked every autumn, and how her father loved to play the fiddle on warm summer evenings. Kai listened with genuine interest. When she finished, he shared stories of his own childhood. He spoke of learning to ride horses before he was tall enough to saddle one alone. He remembered nights around the tribal fire listening to elders tell stories beneath skies filled with countless stars. For the first time, Clara laughed. It was a small laugh, brief and unexpected, but Kai noticed. "You smile more today," he said. "I think," Clara replied thoughtfully. "I'm beginning to feel safe." Kai lowered his eyes respectfully. "I hoped you would." One afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the mountains far faster than expected. A fierce storm rolled across the valley. Thunder echoed through the cliffs as heavy rain poured down. Several children playing near the river became trapped when the water suddenly rose. Without hesitation, Kai rushed toward the flooding stream. "Kai!" Clara shouted. Ignoring the freezing water, he waded into the current, helping each frightened child cross safely one by one. The current grew stronger with every passing minute. As he carried the last little girl to shore, a large tree branch crashed into the rushing water, knocking him off balance. "Kai!" Clara ran forward instinctively. Together, several men pulled him from the river before the current swept him away. He emerged soaked, exhausted, but smiling. The little girl wrapped her arms around him. "You saved me." Kai gently brushed wet hair from her face. No child should face fear alone. Watching the scene, Clara felt tears fill her eyes. She realized something that no rumor or story had ever revealed. Kai never measured strength by how many battles he had won. He measured it by how many lives he could protect. That evening, Clara quietly prepared a warm meal while Kai rested near the fireplace. When she placed the bowl before him, he looked surprised. "You cooked?" She nodded. "You've done so much for everyone else." He accepted the meal with quiet gratitude. "Thank you." It was the first gift either of them had given the other. Not expensive. Not grand. Simply thoughtful. As rain continued tapping softly against the cabin roof, They shared dinner together. Neither noticed how natural the silence had become. Days later, Clara accompanied Kai to a nearby trading post. Some settlers immediately recognized him. Their smiles disappeared. One man muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Can't believe she'd choose to live with an Apache." Another added, "She's probably too frightened to leave." Clara saw Kai's shoulders stiffen, but he said nothing. He simply gathered the supplies they needed and turned to leave. For a moment, Clara considered remaining silent. Instead, she stepped beside him. "He has treated me with more kindness than anyone I've met since coming west," she said firmly. The men stared in surprise. "No one has ever forced me to stay." Kai looked at her, genuinely shocked. It was the first time she had defended him. As they walked back toward the mountains, neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Kai broke the silence. "You didn't have to say that." "I know." "Then why did you?" Clara smiled softly. "Because it was the truth." Kai looked toward the distant sunset, hiding the emotion in his eyes. For weeks, he had patiently earned her trust without asking for anything in return. Now, for the first time, he realized she no longer stood beside him out of obligation. She stood beside him because she believed in the man he truly was. Neither of them noticed the rider watching from the ridge above. The stranger turned his horse toward the nearest town with a cruel smile. By morning, dangerous lies about Kai would begin spreading across the frontier, and those lies would soon place everything they had built in terrible danger. Autumn settled over the mountains, painting the valleys in shades of gold and crimson. The mornings were crisp, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine through the Apache camp. Life had grown peaceful, and for the first time in many years, both Clara and Kai believed they had found a place where they could simply live. But peace on the frontier was often fragile. The rider who had watched them from the ridge arrived in the nearby town before dawn. His name was Victor Kane, a ruthless bounty hunter known for hunting Apaches whether they were guilty of any crime or not. Every captured warrior earned him money, and every rumor of violence brought another opportunity. Inside the crowded saloon, Victor climbed onto a table. "I've got news," he announced loudly. "The Apache called Kai is holding a young settler woman against her will." The room fell silent. Several men looked up from their drinks. "I saw her with my own eyes," Victor continued. "She looked frightened. If we don't act now, she'll disappear into those mountains forever." The story spread through town before sunset. No one asked whether it was true. Fear traveled faster than facts. Among those listening was Edward Blackwood, the wealthiest ranch owner in the valley. He had long dreamed of forcing the Apache people from the surrounding mountains so he could claim the land for his expanding cattle empire. Victor's lie gave him exactly the excuse he needed. Blackwood stood before the townspeople with a confident smile. "If an innocent woman has truly been taken," he declared, "then we have a duty to rescue her." Several men immediately volunteered. Others joined simply because they distrusted the Apache. Within hours, nearly 20 armed riders agreed to ride into the mountains at sunrise. Hidden beneath Blackwood's speech was a far darker plan. He never intended to rescue Clara. He intended to drive every Apache from the valley forever. Meanwhile, neither Kai nor Clara knew what was unfolding beyond the mountains. Their biggest concern that evening was preparing enough firewood before the first snowfall. As they worked together outside the cabin, an elderly Apache elder approached on horseback. His expression was unusually serious. "Kai," he said quietly in Apache, "there is trouble." Kai's face hardened. "What happened?" scouts returned from the valley. They saw armed settlers gathering. Many rifles. They marched this way tomorrow. Clara looked between the two men. What is he saying? Kai turned toward her. Some settlers are coming. Why? I don't know. Although his voice remained calm, Clara noticed something she had never seen before. Concern. Real concern. That night, the tribal council gathered around a large fire. Some younger warriors demanded they prepare for battle. If they attack us, one argued, we must strike first. Others disagreed. Violence will only bring more soldiers. The discussion grew louder. Finally, all eyes turned toward Kai. He stood slowly. We defend our families. He paused. But we do not begin a war. Some of the younger warriors protested. They will not listen to words. Kai met their eyes. Then let history remember who chose violence first. The elder nodded in agreement. Most of the council reluctantly accepted Kai's decision. Clara watched quietly from the edge of the gathering. She realized why the people respected him. His strength came not from anger but from restraint. Later that evening, Clara found Kai standing alone beneath the stars. You think they'll attack? Kai remained silent for a long moment. I hope not. But you're preparing as if they will. He looked toward the dark mountains. My father once hoped peace would stop bullets. It didn't. His words sent a chill through Clara. For the first time, she understood that Kai carried memories far more painful than he ever spoke about. She stepped beside him. If they come, Kai interrupted gently. I'll keep you safe. Clara shook her head. And who keeps you safe? Kai smiled faintly. I've survived many winters. But not alone anymore, Clara replied. Those words lingered between them. For the first time since their marriage, Kai realized someone was worried about him not because he was a warrior, but because he was simply Kai. Just before sunrise, one of the Apache scouts raced into camp. They're here. The camp erupted into motion. Mothers hurried children toward the caves hidden higher in the mountains. Warriors quietly took defensive positions among the rocks and trees. No one fired a shot. They waited. Moments later, the distant sound of horses echoed through the valley. More than 20 armed riders emerged from the morning mist. At their front rode Victor Kane and Edward Blackwood. Blackwood raised his rifle and shouted across the valley. Kai, we know you're hiding the settler woman. Return her now, or we'll burn this camp to the ground. A heavy silence followed. Clara stepped forward before anyone could stop her. I came here by my own choice, she shouted. No one has imprisoned me. Some of the riders exchanged uncertain glances. Victor quickly shouted back. She's frightened. He's forcing her to say that. Several men nodded, unsure whom to believe. Blackwood smiled to himself. Confusion was all he needed. He slowly lifted his rifle toward the sky. One single gunshot would begin a battle that could destroy everything Kai and Clara had built together. And as his finger tightened on the trigger, Kai knew there might be no peaceful way back. The sharp crack of a rifle shattered the stillness of the valley. Birds burst from the pine trees as the echo rolled across the mountains. Horses reared nervously, and frightened children clung to their mothers. For one terrible moment, everyone believed the battle had begun. Kai immediately stepped in front of Clara, shielding her with his own body. Stay behind me, he said calmly. Clara looked around in confusion. She expected arrows to fly and rifles to roll, but instead she saw something unexpected. Most of the Apache warriors remained exactly where they stood. No one attacked. They followed Kai's command. Across the valley, several settlers lowered their rifles, surprised by the restraint they witnessed. Edward Blackwood frowned. This was not the violent confrontation he had hoped for. He wanted fear. He wanted bloodshed. Without chaos, his lies would begin to unravel. Victor Kane rode closer, shouting, "Don't let them fool you. They're waiting to ambush us." Some of the younger settlers hesitated. An older farmer named Samuel Hart stepped forward. "If they plan to attack," he said quietly, "they've already had the chance." His words planted the first seeds of doubt. Blackwood's face darkened. He realized he needed another excuse. Without warning, he raised his rifle not toward Kai, but toward one of the Apache horses grazing nearby and fired. The terrified animal bolted to the camp, throwing supplies into the air. Children screamed and scattered in every direction. The sudden panic made several nervous settlers fire their weapons blindly. Bullets struck rocks and tree trunks. Chaos exploded. "Take cover," Kai shouted. Instead of charging at the settlers, he ran toward the children caught in the open. A frightened little boy stumbled and fell near the center of the valley, frozen with fear as a runaway horse raced toward him. Without hesitation, Kai sprinted forward. He reached the child just before the horse. Wrapping both arms around the boy, Kai threw himself aside as the horse thundered past, missing them by only inches. The child clung to him, crying. "You are safe," Kai whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you." Watching from across the valley, several settlers stared in disbelief. That was not the action of a savage warrior. It was the action of a father protecting a child. At that same moment, another frightened horse broke loose, heading directly toward Clara. She tried to move but slipped on loose gravel. Before anyone else could react, Blackwood himself was knocked from his saddle by the panicked animal. His foot became trapped beneath the stirrup, and the frightened horse dragged him toward a rocky slope. The men who had followed him hesitated. No one wanted to run into the path of the terrified animal. Kai did. Ignoring the danger, he raced after the horse. With remarkable speed, he grabbed the reins and dug his boots into the ground. The powerful horse fought wildly before finally slowing enough for Kai to cut the leather strap trapping Blackwood's foot. The ranch owner collapsed onto the ground, bruised and shaken. He looked up in disbelief. "You saved me." Kai offered his hand. "No life is worth throwing away." Blackwood slowly accepted the help. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The valley fell silent. Even Victor Kane looked stunned. The very man Blackwood had come to destroy had risked his own life to rescue him. Samuel Hart rode forward. "I think we've been lied to." Other settlers nodded. One by one, rifles were lowered. Victor saw everything slipping away. Desperate, he reached for his revolver and aimed it directly at Kai's back. Clara saw the movement first. "Kai." Before Victor could pull the trigger, Samuel struck his arm aside. The shot flew harmlessly into the sky. Several settlers immediately surrounded the bounty hunter. "What are you doing?" one demanded. Victor struggled to escape, but his own companions restrained him. Blackwood slowly stood, his face filled with shame. He looked toward Clara. "Has he truly treated you with honor?" Clara stepped beside Kai and answered without hesitation. "From the day I arrived, he has protected me, respected my choices and shown me more kindness than anyone else. The truth sailed over the valley. Every rumor, every accusation, every fearful story, none of it matched the man standing before them. Blackwood removed his hat. I was wrong. Turning to the settlers, he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. There will be no attack today. One by one, the riders turned their horses toward home. The hatred that had nearly sparked a war faded with them. As the last rider disappeared into the distance, Clara looked at Kai with tears in her eyes. You risked everything, even for the man who wanted to destroy you. Kai smiled gently. If I answered hatred with hatred, nothing would ever change. Clara reached for his hand. This time, he didn't hesitate to take it. High above the valley, the storm clouds finally parted, and warm sunlight spread across the mountains. Neither of them realized that this hard-earned peace was only the beginning. Soon, the valley would witness a celebration unlike any it had seen before, a celebration that would unite two worlds once divided by fear. The first snow of winter arrived quietly. White flakes drifted over the mountains, covering the scars left behind by fear and conflict. The valley looked different now, not because the land had changed, but because the hearts of the people who lived there had. Nearly 2 months had passed since the confrontation between the settlers and the Apache camp. Word of what had truly happened spread farther than Victor Kane's lies ever had. Travelers spoke of the Apache warrior who had refused to start a war. Merchants told the story of the man who had saved the very ranch owner who had come to destroy him. Parents repeated the tale to their children, not as a story of violence, but as a lesson in courage, mercy, and honor. Kai never sought recognition. He returned to his simple life, repairing fences, hunting only what the camp needed, and helping anyone who asked for his strength. Clara often smiled as she watched him. The quiet man she had once feared had become the person she trusted most in the world. One cold morning, several riders approached the Apache camp. The warriors watched cautiously from the hills, but Kai recognized the man riding at the front. Edward Blackwood. This time, he carried no rifle, only a small white cloth tied to his saddle as a sign of peace. When he reached the camp, he removed his hat and climbed down from his horse. I've come to make things right, he said. The entire camp fell silent. Blackwood looked directly at Kai. I believed lies because they served my own interests. For that, I owe you and your people an apology. He handed Kai a folded map. This land belongs to your ancestors. I won't try to claim it again. The Apache elders exchanged surprised glances. Blackwood continued. I've also asked the town council to recognize a permanent trading agreement between our communities. No more raids. No more false accusations. We all lose when fear controls us. Kai studied him for a moment before extending his hand. I accept your apology. The two men shook hands. For many watching, it was the first time they had ever seen an Apache warrior and a wealthy ranch owner greet each other as equals. As winter turned into spring, the valleys slowly changed. Settlers began trading fairly with the Apache families. The Apache hunters shared their knowledge of the mountains, while settlers helped repair wagons and build stronger bonds. Children from both communities laughed together along the river, no longer caring who had been born on which side of the valley. Old hatred slowly gave way to friendship. One evening, the tribe gathered for its annual spring celebration. Large fires burned beneath the stars. Drums echoed across the valley while men, women, and children danced together in colorful traditional clothing. Clara stood quietly beside Kai, watching the celebration. "It feels different now," she whispered. Kai smiled. "It is. The valley finally has peace." He looked at her. "No." She raised an eyebrow. "The valley has hope." At that moment, the village elder approached them with a warm smile. "You have reminded us," he said, "that peace is not created by a people who never face hatred." He looked at Kai. "It is created by those who refuse to let hatred change who they are." The elder then turned toward Clara. "And by those who choose truth even when fear would be easier." The couple exchanged quiet smiles. Neither needed to say anything. They both knew how far they had come. Later that night, Kai led Clara to the hill overlooking the valley. The campfires glowed below like tiny stars scattered across the earth. "I have something for you," he said. From his pocket, he carefully removed a small necklace carved from polished cedar. At its center rested a delicate eagle feather. "My mother made these," he said softly. "She believed they reminded people that true love gives freedom instead of taking it." He gently placed the necklace around Clara's neck. Tears filled her eyes. "It's beautiful. It belonged to someone I hoped I would one day trust completely." Clara reached for his hand. "I spent my first night here believing I had lost everything." She smiled through her tears. "But this place gave me a family I never expected." Kai looked across the peaceful valley. "And you gave a lonely man a reason to believe in tomorrow." The wind carried the sound of laughter from the celebration below. For the first time in many years, the mountains no longer echoed with fear. They echoed with hope. And as Kai and Clara stood together beneath the endless sky, they understood that love had never been about overcoming one another. It had always been about walking side by side through sorrow, through forgiveness, and into a future they would build together. Their story became one that parents told for generations, not because it began with fear, but because it ended with compassion, trust, and the courage to see the humanity in someone the world had taught them to fear. The end.